Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be looking at the Mojave Railroad. If you've ever played Fallout New Vegas, then you've definitely seen that there is a railroad that spans across the entire map. And it's kind of random on where it goes. I wanted to see if there's any rhyme and reason to this railroad. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time because it just seemed like a really fun idea, but I've kept putting it off. So here we are finally, and I have to say, I am fucking confused. This railroad actually makes no freaking sense, and it is difficult to navigate. I fought over a dozen Deathclaws just walking across the entire damn thing. So, let's see where this railroad leads us, and let's just see how chaotic its design really is. So I decided to start on the very southern part of the map where the railroad begins, at Crescent Canyon East. Now, here we can see the railroad entering New Vegas on a bridge. Also, there's a lot of golden geckos in this area, so be ready if you want to come check it out for yourself. And we can see that this bridge has collapsed into Crescent Canyon, and that this bridge, since it's collapsed, we cannot leave the Mojave Wasteland. If you want to know more about this location, I'll post a link to my Crescent Canyon Unexplored Mojave episode in the description below. There are several locations in this video, so if you want to know more about those locations, I'll put the links in the description below. But besides that, there really isn't much there, just a collapsed bridge, and that is where the railroad begins. As we make our way up the railroad near the Mojave Drive-In and Bradley Shack, we can climb up to see that there is a tunnel. This tunnel has no known exit, but it's just suggested that this tunnel could also be used to access the Mojave Wasteland via railroad. Now, if you don't know, the railroad is actually in use, or was in use, by the NCR. They were able to repurpose a lot of the railroad in order to make cement, in order to build fortifications in the Mojave Wasteland. Now, as we get close to Nipton, we can see the Welcome to California sign, and we can find a railroad crossing along the road here. And this railroad crossing is going to be something important to remember for later in this video, so just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Then we continue our journey north along the railroad, and we can find Coyote Den. This is the location of the first episode of the Unexplored Mojave. We have this crashed truck with a skeleton and 2 suitcases. I didn't mention that in my first episode of the Unexplored Mojave, so a little bit of a bonus there. And usually there's coyotes in this den, but there were none for me. Usually they respawn, but yeah, there were none for me. We can see the railroad was blocked off by some boulders, and we can make our way north to the Emergency Service Railyard. This is an old railyard that was obviously used for repairing trains and probably emergency situations. We can see 2 cranes, one of which is collapsed, along with some towers. Perhaps they're for oil or gas or diesel or something, I don't really know. There's 2 beds here, and there are a lot of bottle caps. There's actually 2 Sunset Sarsaparilla bottle caps, so a pretty good find. But besides that, there's really not a whole lot in this area, and I have mentioned this area in a past video, specifically my Dead Wind Cavern video. But as we can see, it's just kind of an old repair yard for trains. We can see the tracks split off, but this one immediately ends, and there's nothing there. So we will continue going north, following this railroad into Powder Ganger territory. As I began my journey north, I immediately noticed that there was a prospector. And I was really confused why a prospector was all the way out here. Perhaps he just spawns near the Emergency Service Railyard, but when I tried to talk to him, he started running away for some reason. I don't know why or where he was going. There weren't any enemies that I was aware of. And when I came up over this rock, he had stopped running and was just staring off into the distance. Yeah, I'm not sure what he was doing out here, but, I thought it was kind of interesting, and I just kind of wanted to record my journey along the railroad. Here we can find the Powder Ganger camp south, and this is just a small camp that acts as a fast travel point around the NCR Correctional Facility. Then we can make our way north towards Jean, which is a town also near Good Springs. Jean Skydiving is off in the distance, and below Jean Skydiving are several pools of water, along with some boat flies. And I just thought it was interesting because boat flies are not so common in New Vegas. They are a very easy enemy, but since Mojave is a desert, there aren't many pools of water where boat flies like to hang around, but here in Jean, we do have some. We can continue our way up, and we find another railroad crossing along with Ringo's crashed or ambushed caravan, and some powder gangers. I decided not to fight them because it's just not worth my time, and I continue to make my way north past the NCR Correctional Facility. Along the highway here, we can find an ambushed Brahmin or caravan, and there's nothing really on the body. I just thought it was interesting. And then as we move north more, we can find this collapsed truck, which just had a ton of food in it, along with a doctor's bag. And I just thought it was really interesting, something I never really knew existed, and it's probably be pretty good if you need emergency health. Now, as we keep on moving north, I found this bridge. This is an unmarked bridge or location in Fallout New Vegas. I've never talked about this in this series before, so here it is. It is making its first appearance in this video. It features a bridge with a railroad going over the top, and then a bright follower, a dead bright follower on the bottom, who has random energy weapon and loot. But, not much besides that. And then we can continue our way further north. Here we just got a majestic look at the bridge, and we will go past Sloan. I'm not going to talk much about Sloan because I haven't covered it yet in this series, but I'm sure we'll get to it. And as we reach the outer portions of Quarry Junction, we will find a small shack and a railroad platform. I'm pretty confident in saying that this railroad platform was probably used by the NCR and during the pre-war era to load materials onto trains. If you don't know, the NCR was using Quarry Junction in order to make cement. They loaded the trains here with the material, and they took the trains to Boulder City, where the cement was made. And as we continued further down, we came to the I-15 junction, and this is where my story with the death claws began. There were so many freaking death claws here, more than I've ever remembered in Fallout New Vegas at this specific area. When I made my I-15 junction video, I encountered a few death claws at this location, but this time there were about 7 or 8 death claws that I had to kill. I'm not sure if it's because I'm a high level, if it's completely random, or if it's just really, really, really bad luck. But no matter the reason, I had to kill all of these death claws, but with an anti-material rifle and being a level 50, it was actually pretty easy, but it did take up some time. And in this building in front of me is the Junction 15 railway station. Sorry, I said Junction I-15, it's just Junction 15. The interstate next to me is Interstate 15 or I-15, which is why I said that. Here, the railroad splits into two. Part of it goes east, and part of it continues north. So, for the time being, I decided to go ahead and follow it east to see where this section of the railroad ends. I knew if I kept following it north, it would go on for a long time. Eventually, we run into the train station at REPCONN headquarters. Obviously, this train station was probably used for workers at REPCONN HQ. Also, there's a small playground next to the train station, which I thought was interesting. As we move forward, we come to the Followers' Outpost. This outpost obviously used to be some kind of train yard. Perhaps it was used by the NCR, but maybe they've since abandoned it. It would obviously be useful, though, for delivering supplies to the Mojave Wasteland. Eventually, then, as we continue further east, we arrive at Boulder City, specifically Boulder City train station. Here we can find a caravan and a merchant, along with some buildings and facilities for making cement. This was used by the NCR to make cement for a significant amount of time before Death Claws took over Quarry Junction. After that, we can find the railroad is in major disrepair, and it kind of just abruptly ends. And this is where things start to get a little bit confusing or frustrating. As we follow the railroad, we can see it really goes nowhere. It just kind of goes into a hill, and then there is the road. We don't know if it ends here, or if it were to continue, maybe go towards Hoover Dam. And there's no indication about where the railroad would go from here. So we're just left to assume that the end of the line is in Boulder City, and for whatever reason, the railroad continues significantly after the train yard. Here we can find some destroyed buildings next to the road where one might assume the railroad would go, but obviously it doesn't. And as we move further up the road, we can see that the train obviously would not continue because there's no room for train tracks. Because the main road goes in between of these rocks, kind of in this ditch, and there's no space for a railroad, and there's no indication there is a railroad here. Now, I found it interesting, if you look at the mini-map, it looks like the railroad actually curves to the left, and in the in-game, it curves to the right, but it looks like it might have supposed to have been going left, and maybe it was just an oversight or something, and perhaps it does go towards Lake Mead, or it's supposed to go towards Hoover Dam. Either way, this is the end of the line for this eastern route. We cannot follow this railroad any further. So we will head back to the Junction 15 station. Real quick, I made this crudely drawn map to kind of show the layout of the railroad. Here we can see the two southern entry points in the Mojave, along with the platform stations and rail yards that we've come across so far, and we shall continue to expand this map. Heading back to the Junction 15 railway station, we will continue our journey north towards New Vegas. We can see the Tops billboard and the Lucky 38 in the background. Eventually we came across this bridge which goes over Interstate 15, and then the Sampson rock crushing plant. Now there's no train platform here, however we might assume that the rock crushing plant would have used the train in order to carry those rocks. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that they have to move to this plant. However, there's no indication that the rock plant used the railway. As we continue our way north, we're going to go into Fiend territory, and this will lead us to New Vegas Steel, along with the South Vegas ruins. And near New Vegas Steel is a platform. The steel plant, or this other bombed out building, probably used the railway in order to transport their goods. Obviously, New Vegas Steel is still occupied by its robotic employees, so perhaps they're waiting for the next train to come on by. As we make our way north, we will come by the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters. I don't know if Sunset Sarsaparilla would have used a railway, but it seems like that's something they would want to use in order to transport their product, but there's no indication they did so. Now, this is something I wanted to mention. Sometimes in New Vegas, there is no railway crossing. Here we are in the middle of New Vegas, and we can see that this road just kind of combines with the railway. There is no crossing, which is very unsafe. So maybe in the New Vegas universe, railway laws and road laws are not nearly as developed. Also here, the road just kind of abruptly ends, and Obsidian just threw in roadblocks instead of actually ending the road. I just thought this was really funny and kind of maybe lazy. But anyways, the railway continues towards Freeside, and it is now blocked off with this wall. So we will have to travel to Freeside in order to continue following the railway. And on the other side of the wall, we can see that the railway does indeed continue, so an A+ for continuity from Bethesda. And there's also some kind of train station, it would appear, or perhaps a rail yard. Now, from here, the railway splits into two. Part of it kind of goes towards the H&H Tools factory. However, when I went to the H&H Tools factory, I couldn't find the railroad. I couldn't find anywhere where it would have gone. Perhaps it's just blocked off and behind one of these buildings and is inaccessible. Perhaps the railway is supposed to continue north, or perhaps it's just a rail yard. For the purpose of this video, we're going to assume this is a station and a rail yard, and that this railway going left does not go anywhere besides a dead end. Then we can continue to follow the main railroad here, and it'll take us through Freeside. Definitely, if you've been to Freeside, you've probably seen the railway, but, you know, maybe you didn't pay much attention to it. And that's a big reason I wanted to make this video, is while we play New Vegas, of course we see the railroad, but we never really pay much mind to it. So I wanted to kind of see where it goes and see if there's any rhyme or reason to it. Eventually, though, the railway does indeed end in Freeside, and we have to go outside once again. It comes out near the Crimson Caravan Trading Company. Then as we head east, we will eventually reach Nellis Air Force Base, or the Boomers. And even on the railroad, there are warning signs to not enter. Of course, at this point, I'm already friendly with the Boomers. And then we come to another fork in the railroad. Part of it kind of branches off towards Nellis Air Force Base, and part of it goes into this tunnel. So first we will head towards Nellis Air Force Base, and the railroad will take us to this second gate for Nellis Air Force Base. So obviously this railroad was used by the US military during the pre-war. It was actually probably quite important to United States infrastructure during the war era. And then eventually, as we continue to follow the railroad through Nellis Air Force Base, I found this parking lot. Never realized this parking lot was here, so I just thought I would show it. And then we come to the end of the line, just a small rail yard, and the railroad doesn't continue north anymore. So right now we actually have a complete kind of layout for a lot of the New Vegas Railway. As we can see from the southernmost part to the northernmost part, it actually makes a lot of sense, but we do get a little confused when we head over to Boulder City. Alright then, let's continue on from the train tunnel. So Train Tunnel is a kind of famous or perhaps infamous location in Fallout New Vegas because it is protected by a very hard lock. So many players never go inside. It was intended for players to use to kind of sneak past the boomers. However, when most players encounter the boomers, they're a very low level, and there's no way they would have 100 lockpick. But inside, we can find a lot of ghouls. These ghouls do respawn, and if you've seen my video on Train Tunnel, then you know these ghouls are always here. Also, there's a ton of frag mines inside of this location. On the other side, you have to be incredibly careful because you will likely be ambushed by death claws. And for whatever reason, there were a lot more death claws than the first time I came here a long time ago in my Train Tunnel video. Again, I assume it's because of my high level, but perhaps it's just dumb luck. I sent that death claw flying, and I killed his baby. And after killing all of the death claws, we can continue our journey east to Gypsum train yard. Gypsum used to be a mine where they probably mined gypsum, and there is a train yard here. Now this is actually based also on a real life location, so obviously there is a real rail network within real-life Las Vegas. Here we have a lot of trains or boxcars within the rail yard and a locomotive. However, we can assume the NCR was never able to utilize these trains because it seems like the boomers would have caused them a lot of trouble. So perhaps the NCR only used the rail network between Quarry Junction and Boulder City. Also here we can find some kind of train platform, perhaps for workers at the mine. Then we can continue our journey even further east, and we come to the end of the line at Lake Mead. Here at Callville Bay, we can see there used to be a crane and that this area was probably used in the pre-war era in order to A, load materials from Lake Mead onto the trains, or to load off materials from the trains for whatever operations were going on at Lake Mead. And then here on our crudely drawn map, we can see the complete layout of the New Vegas railway system. This was a really fun experience, and I had a lot of fun navigating this railway. Thankfully, all of the railway is on the map, right? Well, no, actually, there is a portion of the freaking railroad that is not marked on the map. If you ever played New Vegas, you've probably realized I have missed a large section of railroad, especially down by Novak. So let's head on down and see what there is. So down here by Ranger Station Charlie, we will, well, A, find a lot of enemies like mole rats and golden geckos, but we will also find this sealed train tunnel. I've talked about this train tunnel before in my Dead Wind Cavern video, and this tunnel kind of makes me angry because it doesn't go anywhere. However, after thinking about it, I do have a theory. So we will talk about that later. But for now, this railroad kind of begins near Dead Wind Cavern, which is one of the most difficult locations in Fallout New Vegas. We can then follow the railroad past Ranger Station Charlie, and this railroad then continues up towards Novak. There's the all-famous dinosaur, and of course a tumbleweed going across the tracks. Kind of a very scenic, kind of western shot. I love it. We have a railroad crossing, or not really a crossing, just kind of good luck. Hope a train doesn't hit you as you drive across crossing. And this is when I noticed the railroad is actually marked on the map as an actual road. The road here splits off, as you can see, and attaches to this other road that heads towards Novak. But the railroad itself is considered a drivable road, unlike the other railroad, which is indicated by a smaller line. So that's kind of interesting, don't know why that is, but we can follow this railroad past Old Lady Gibson's scrapyard all the way to Helios 1, where the railroad just ends, abruptly. And there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. And here you can see on the mini-map, the road, Helios 1, and the scrapyard. Don't know what's going on here, but I do have a theory. And here is what I think. Here we can see on the mini-map this small section of the railway. However, if you remember, the railway also ends in Boulder City, and it appears that the railway was beginning to curve to the south. And my theory is this, that in the pre-war era, the US military, or just some kind of government entity or company, was trying to expand the railroad down south towards Helios 1, and that train tunnel was supposed to connect up with the major original railroad. However, perhaps the project was never finished. This would explain why that tunnel doesn't have an exit. Perhaps the other side of it just wasn't constructed yet, and it explains why this section of the railroad actually doesn't show up on the minimap, because it was never used during the pre-war era. It was simply under construction. So I wanted to investigate and see if there was any evidence for my theory. However, I was a bit disappointed. As we go from Helios 1 to Boulder City, we do come across a construction site. However, they were obviously just building the interstate here. You can see the end of the road there and a lot of building materials. Perhaps they were also going to build the railroad, but there's no real indication that they were going to do so. However, this area, for the most part, next to the El Dorado Dry Lake is very flat, and we can easily get over to Boulder City if we cross a hill. They would have needed a lot of land movers, but it would be possible, I think, to connect Boulder City towards Helios 1 via railroad. So that is my theory, and this is the final map. The dotted line and question marks are Otter's theory, so it's not official, obviously, but I think it looks like a pretty good map with those sections filled in. It makes a lot more sense, to me, at least. And if you can't tell, I'm not an expert when it comes to railroads or trains, so if you have any input or know anything that I didn't mention, please feel free to post it in the comments section below. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. I really had a lot of fun making this episode and doing something a little bit different with this series. If you guys have any recommendations for locations or an idea you would like to see in the Unexplored Mojave, please post it in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time.